Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Unbroken Veterans. This week, we're talking to Mike Durant, who is a former Army helicopter pilot, and among other things, which we'll discuss. And so, Mike, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
So for starters, and we can save it to the end if you'd like, but we do love hearing funny stories. And in my research, I know you've got a few. But you tell whichever one might be on your mind right now.
Okay. Yeah, there's a few. Let's see. Do you prefer something tied to my career or just life in general?
I would do one of each if you don't mind.
Yeah, good icebreaker.
But if you have to choose one, I love hearing military stories because there's just another level that people can relate on, So I do love a good military funny story.
Okay. I'm trying to think if this is actually funny. It's I don't know. It's in my book. I wrote about it. I think it's funny. We'll give it a shot. So we're in Desert Storm, and we had armed up the Black Hawk, put some weapons on it, and we're out there uh, doing armed reconnaissance, as we called it, looking for Scud missiles. If you
Oh
were
yeah.
around at the time or you
Yeah.
remember the significance of the Scud missiles, they were a big issue because the Iraqis were trying to draw the Israelis into the war, and they were launching Scuds into Israel, and our mission was to try to find them and neutralize that. So we go out on this armed reconnaissance mission, and we get a call over the SATCOM radio that there's been a sighting of a TEL, as we call them, out in the Western Desert, and we get the grid coordinates. So we fly toward these grid coordinates, and I mean, I'll just never forget it. It's one of the most. I'd be curious to know what my heart rate was because it was pretty hua, I guess I would say, coming over this power line and then diving down on this TEL launcher that's out in the middle of the desert. And I pushed the trigger, and some minigun rounds came out, and then I tried to shoot rockets, and they wouldn't shoot. So,
Is this around the time that the armaments on the Blackhawks were new? If I know
well,
my history right.
the unit I was in is still the only unit that has armed up the Black Hawk. I mean,
Oh,
it's a very unique capability, and we always thought it gives you a lot more flexibility on a deployment if you got the ability to use it as an assault platform, a search and rescue platform, or an attack helicopter platform. And we could reconfigure it in a matter of minutes. So we pursued that path, and we got the funding and got the support of the leadership, and made it happen. Kind of amazing thing to be a part of. And now here we are using this thing in combat for the first time.
yeah.
And so I come around again, and I was flying with a guy named Lance Hill. Liked him a lot. He and I really did well in the cockpit, and I said, of course, it's a typical pilot thing to think somebody else has screwed up, right? It's not. It could never be you. So, so I said, Lance, it's one freaking switch. Just flip it. Meaning. So I'm in my mind, I'm assuming that Lance didn't flip the switches correctly to get us in a position to where we could shoot this thing. So he didn't say anything. Come around again. I pull the trigger again, and it won't fire. And I mean, I am livid at this point because there's another aircraft, in our flight of two that's just throwing everything at this Scud launcher, and we're basically, spectators at this point. And I remember on the way back, I was just so upset that this thing had failed us because I had great experiences with reliability in my military career, and very seldom did the equipment ever fail. And I said to the crew that I was so pissed off I was going to crash the aircraft into the desert on purpose. I was so mad. And and apparently one of the crew chiefs thought I was serious, and it created a bit of a stir afterwards. And there was some concern about my mental stability, getting that angry. Then it happened again, and I don't want to take all night talking about this. It happened again 2 nights later. And that time I really was thinking about crashing it into the desert. We finally figured out what the problem was. It was just a component in the aircraft, and we got it fixed. And then, of course, by the time we got it fixed, the opportunity had passed, and I never got a chance to shoot again. So anyway, again, I said I didn't know if it was funny or not, but it was definitely dramatic.
I think that qualifies as funny, I think.
My one of my favorite stories actually has to do with one of our daughters, and she's kind of a mini me. She's, you know, a grown woman now, but at the time she's probably, I don't know, 7 years old or something. And we were at the lake, and we had a break-in in our boat. It was like a ski boat. Somebody stole some equipment, and I thought the boat was damaged, so I called the police, and I wanted to file a report just in case I had to get the thing repaired. And prior to that, I had gone on a speaking event for some law enforcement up in Canada. And, I don't know how well you know police and law enforcement, but their culture is very similar to ours. They
Yeah,
kind of know
right.
each other, you know what I mean? It's all feels very, very similar. And, they had done a few things to kind of mess with me, and they bought me a gift and put it in my hotel room, and they knew I was by myself. It was a bottle of wine, a couple of glasses, a robe, some slippers, so the kind of thing like you would get if you were, maybe not a honeymoon, but at least, out with your spouse or your girlfriend or whatever, and, you're trying to be romantic and buy, something that for the occasion.
yeah.
So at the time I would bring stuff home for the kids because, they always liked having that stuff that otherwise I would throw away. And so I got home and I divvied it all up, and there's also some handcuffs because these were cops, right? So they had given me these, they're like zip tie handcuffs that they're disposable.
Yeah.
I'd never seen them before. I thought they were kind of interesting. So I brought them home and showed them to the kids. So back to the break-in, the police show up, and this gigantic cop. I mean, the guy was like 6.5 feet tall. He looked like a linebacker. Got all his stuff on, and he, bangs on the door, and I come to the door, and of course, Mini Me, Taylor, the young girl, goes with me. And I open the door, and she sees this guy standing there, and she says, "Hey, Dad, look, he's got handcuffs just like the ones that you brought home from that place where you got those fuzzy slippers." And the guy looks at me like, "Do you want to explain that?" And I'm like, "No, I don't want to explain that. I'm going to file a police report,
Just I plead the fifth.
Just nice, Dad.
That's funny.
That's Taylor in a nutshell, actually.
So my daughter did something similar. This is a couple years ago when she was in preschool. Went to drop her off, and she had said she wanted to just get out of the car on her own. They got teachers there if they do that, and there's the choice to walk them in. She said she wanted to just be dropped off. So I said, okay. And so I dressed accordingly. I didn't change as though I would get out of a car and be seen in public to include a hole in my shirt. And so we're in the line. And as we're sitting there, she says, "Daddy, I want you to take me inside." And I said, "Honey, it's too late. Like, daddy can't go inside. He has a hole in his shirt." She goes, "You don't want them to know that you have a hole in your shirt?" I said, "That's right, honey. I don't want them to know." She goes, "I'm going to tell them." And then I said, "Please don't." And so then she gets out of the car, and I go to pick her up later that day, and I was dressed properly, and I went inside to pick her up. She comes out, the teacher's standing right there, and she goes, "Daddy, I told them you have a hole in your shirt." And then the teacher said, "Yeah, she talked all about that the whole morning." And I was like, "Awesome." Thanks so much for diming me out, kid. But those are good. Those are good. And I like one of each because I do like getting into the transition period and talking about fatherhood or motherhood, depending on our guest, and getting into kind of civilian side too. So thank you for sharing one of each. So moving on from there, you've obviously done quite a few things since your Army service, but if we can start pre-Army, kind of what were you like as a younger gentleman or kid? Were you outdoors a lot? Kind of what drew your interest into the military? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I was outdoors a lot. I mean, it was the '70s, right? So,
Hmm.
we didn't have video games. We had to go. We played a lot of street hockey. I grew up in New Hampshire, and I did play ice hockey, but street, probably had 10 times as much time playing street hockey as ice hockey because it's easy to do. It's just
Yeah.
you'll, you know, get some nets and get a ball and run around a parking lot. And we did a ton of that kind of stuff. I skied. I played a little bit of football. So I mean, I a variety of things. My
Yeah.
dad was a big hunter. We did a fair amount of deer hunting and water sports, all that kind of stuff.
Good
I
deal.
got interested. I got interested in the military. I guess it was sort of happening without my knowing it. But my father was in the National Guard. I had uncles in the National Guard, so it was just normal like that. I thought everybody had relatives that were in the National Guard, right? Because I
Hmm.
mean, most of the adult males in my circle were National Guardsmen. So we'd go to the armory and we'd see them in uniform every once in a while, and they'd go on the 2 weeks every year. So that was just normal to me. And then there was a friend of the family who was actually an Army warrant officer in the National Guard who had a business in New Hampshire where he provided helicopters and airplanes to support a variety of things. I mean, the most interesting thing he did, I don't know if you've ever seen it before, when they harvest cranberries, they actually use helicopters and nets to pull them out of the bog.
Huh.
I mean, that's
Wow.
just an example of one of the weird things that you can do with aircraft. And he gave us a ride in one of his aircraft when I was 14 years old. I think I was. It blew me away. I mean, we're Mount Washington is the highest mountain north of Mount Mitchell, which is the highest in the Appalachians. Mount Washington is 6,280 feet, and we're flying over the top of it. And I'm like in this glass bubble, and thinking, this is a job. I could,
Wow.
someone who might actually pay me to do this. And I thought, no, this is definitely what I want to do. And a few years later, I saw a Blackhawk for the first time. They were brand new, right about the time I was graduating high school. And I just thought, wow, this, absolutely want to go. So I went and talked to a recruiter. The recruiter told me that I couldn't go straight to flight school, which may or may not have been true at the time. It's all
Right.
about. I hate to bust on the recruiters, but the quote is
Oh, they
always been,
know.
yeah, the recruiter's lying if their lips are moving. But the bottom line is, I was told I couldn't go, but I could possibly apply from active duty. So that's what I decided to do. And I went in. It was a pretty good MOS. I went to DLI for Spanish. I learned uh, Spanish, and then I went to an MI unit and in Panama, and I actually applied for flight school from there. Got in and ended up getting Blackhawks. They were brand new, and I got the only Blackhawk slot in the class. And
Wow.
that whole sort of vision of what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do turned into reality. And it's good timing. It's being in the right place at the right time, and I guess making a couple of decent decisions and finding the right inspiration that got me there.
That's awesome. One thing I was curious about, and I think I kind of saw my answer, but this is one of those, want to make sure I hear it from somebody that did it. Because you were in the 160th SOAR. Is that how you say it, or did you say 160th, or you just say SOAR? Maybe nobody says SOAR. And for
Uh,
those listening,
it's kind of
it's
all of the above. Yeah, the 160th is usually how it's referred to, though. Yeah.
okay. But yeah, so when you got in on a Blackhawk, all that, did you go straight into the 160th? Did you go for that, or did you spend some time somewhere else flying?
So the 160th was may not have even existed when I was in flight school. I don't remember the exact date that the unit was formed, but it's right about the same time. And I had never even heard of it. So I I ended up going to Korea as my first assignment, flew medevac, and I wouldn't have been able to get in the unit anyway because the units got minimum hour requirements, and they there's been times when people have been taken straight out of flight school because maybe they had a special operations background, and you know they they decided it was worth assuming the risk. And I'll say risk. It's not really risk. It's just if you don't have a proven track record of having flown, 500 hours, 1,000 hours, whatever,
Mhm.
it's kind of unknown how well you'll do in the unit, as a pilot or as a crew member, really.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went to Korea, then I came back, went to the 101st, which is really what I needed to do. I needed to get experience, get some night vision goggle time. And then, in the process, I had heard about the unit and decided to apply. And, it's a pretty extensive assessment process. And, I don't know what the percentage is about, how many people get in, how many people don't, but it is pretty extensive. I mean, it's like any of the other special mission units. It's, there's a physical fitness test, psych test, a board, flight check. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. There's just, again, you're going to spend a lot of money trying to train people to do this mission. So you want to make sure you're bringing the right people in the organization. And I made it through, and then started what we call Green Platoon, which is, even though you got all that experience, you're kind of starting over again because you don't really know the mission. You don't know a lot of the equipment that's in the aircraft, and you got to learn all that, and then you got to make your way up through the ranks within the organization.
That's awesome. So when you first got there, were you kind of straight to business and focused, or was part of you taking a minute to be like, wow, like I'm here, I'm doing what I wanted to do? Um, or were you were moving a million miles an hour and so you just were focused on the next task?
There was a wow factor. I mean, it's it's just an amazing place. I'm sure it still is. I've been out as long as I was in the military now, which is amazing to me till you think about. But it just it didn't disappoint. I mean, the customers, as we call them, the people that we support, and the missions, even the training missions, were just incredible. And yeah, I felt like I definitely found a home.
What was something you got out of your experience in the 160th that you didn't anticipate? Because obviously you like flying helicopters. You knew you were going to probably enjoy that. What was something you got that you didn't foresee?
I think commitment to the mission. I mean, I'm not to say that everyone in the military's not already got a sense of commitment to the mission, but it's like it takes it to another level. I mean, that if you end up getting involved in any of these things, they're probably going to be high profile. They're going to be very important, and you can't fail. And you've got to you have to sort of embrace that responsibility, I guess I would say, and put everything you can into being as good as you can be. And that's and the results speak for themselves. I mean, the track record of that organization is just incredible. And,
Hmm.
the people that serve there have my ongoing and always will have my admiration and respect, because it's there's a lot of demand put on. I mean, there were guys, in the 20 years or so that we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, that had deployed 30 times. I mean, they're deploying 3 months on, 3 months off for certain periods of time. But I mean, 30 deployments. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just insane.
Yeah.
It's a
Hmm.
volunteer unit, and these guys are staying there now. Gals too. Uh, and that to me underscores that whole point I was making about commitment to the mission. I mean, if you're willing to do that, you got to be committed to the mission.
Yeah.
And, but it takes its toll. I mean, there's a lot of names on the wall and a lot of families put through a lot, but I think everybody understands the importance of that capability, and are proud to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Um, how many deployments did you end up going on?
Well, combat deployments, 4. I
Okay.
went to Prime Chance, which was the Iranians were trying to blow up tankers even back then, and we were flying around the Persian Gulf trying to catch them, and we did. Not me personally, but the first night vision goggle helicopter tactical engagement was done by guys in our unit who disabled an Iranian boat that was dropping mines in the Gulf. And then the next one was Just Cause, which was Panama, which was, I would say, of all the missions that I was a part of, training or otherwise, the one I would say I'm most proud of, because it was just very complicated. There was things going on all over the place. It was an 8-hour mission, with 72 hours from getting our pagers going off back at Fort Campbell. We're attacking another country, and it's just one of those, real deal. Hostage rescue. There was a prisoner liberated from a prison. We took down airfields. It was just incredible. And then after that, Desert Storm, which we talked about earlier with the guns and all that, and then Somalia.
Okay. All right. What was the average op tempo like for the combat ones? Were they all nonstop, or were some of them a little slower up until it was go time?
So refreshing those 4, I would say they're all go.
Yeah.
Like Panama example, within a couple of days of us leaving Fort Campbell, where it's H-hour.
Mm-hmm.
Somalia, same thing, back-to-back missions.
Yeah.
Desert Storm, flying every other night.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, pretty busy op tempo.
All right. Good deal. Asked a lot of questions. Do you want to throw any in before we go forward?
Well, yeah, I would like throughout your career, what were like some of your biggest challenges that you faced and kind of how you overcame those?
Well, honestly, I left for basic training 2 weeks after my 18th birthday. And I think I felt like I had made a mistake. I don't think I was quite prepared for the dramatic change that, the military lifestyle was going to impose upon me.
Right.
Maybe I was just naive. I was just, some high school kid that thought, I'm going to go, they're going to give me a flight suit and I'll jump in a helicopter and go fly. I don't know what I thought actually, but all I can tell you is I thought I had made a mistake. And to the point where I was seriously considering bailing. And then, it's this typical NCO mentor, kind of give you some sage advice that if you take it, everything's probably going to be okay. Hopefully everybody has the skill set required to identify when that person is talking to you and listen to them and do it. And that's what happened to me. I was, encouraged to, just stick it out. It wasn't going to be like this for the whole time that I was in the military, and there was a lot of opportunity, and
Yeah.
it turned me around, and I decided, okay, look, this sucks, but I'll make it happen, and completely change my mindset. And then I was looking for ways to, if you go to the 160th, you're looking for ways to challenge yourself even more. So
Yeah.
Right.
it was a complete reversal. And, so I guess the recap on that is finding people that you can trust that, can give you that good advice. And I think I've been fortunate in my life that at various key points along the way, there was that person, and I listened to them, and it did work out in the end. Now, it doesn't always, but, I think you're better off, seeking the counsel of somebody who's been there, done that they can help you make these tough life decisions. So right there, this whole thing could have got derailed within, a month.
Right.
And it didn't. Another simple, stupid admin thing. My application for flight school got lost because, we're not applying online in 1981, right?
It's funny you say that because there's times where I have to go on the computer to do something for the Army, and part of me just wants to bitch that I have to go do it at all. And the other part of me tells myself, I think, you know what? You were so lucky you're doing this on a computer, on a system that will save this and someone else can see it.
That's true.
And someone had told me back then, they said, make a second copy of everything just in case. And I did. And sure enough, the first packet is lost. I'm calling DA, and no, we don't have anything here. And I was able to reassemble, another packet and get it sent in and got accepted. So just little simple things, to again to underscore the importance of listening to people with more wisdom and experience than you have,
Mhm.
and following their advice.
So with that wisdom, you've spoken a lot on Mogadishu, so we don't need to spend 2 hours on that. But I guess I'm interested to hear your summary of maybe the good takeaways, the advice you got out of that. Some information for either people in the service now or just experiencing a questionably hard time, um, ways to move through it, things to think about, anything that helped you through, or again, that you learned about, whether it was tactical that could help someone in that space now or beyond tactical.
Well, there were lots of tactical, and I used to do presentations. I've probably done it 500 times on this thing, and if it's a military audience, I would talk about those specific things. The thing about it is, it's been 30 years, so all of that stuff was either implemented or relearned in 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Right.
So there's not that much really that I would think of worth spending time on. But I will say at the time there were a ton of things,
Mm-hmm.
just a ton of things. And again, these are arguably some of the best units that the military has to offer, and there were still a lot of things that should have been done slightly differently because every situation is different. And uh, I think we did learn from them. I think the biggest thing about it, put at the highest level, is the war on terror starts 8 years after Somalia. And I think Somalia served as a wake up call about the challenges of urban warfare, the challenges of a complex combat environment where there's civilians, there's non combatants, there's people you can't identify, you know, all of that complexity. Whereas prior to that, the focus was more on we're going to go fight the Russians in Europe, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it was more of a traditional force on force type,
Right.
but Somalia, in Panama certainly too, but because Panama went so well and it didn't last very long, I'm not sure there was necessarily a sense that, hey, this is the future of warfare. But when Somalia happened, I think it did sort of whisper in the strategic people's ear that, hey, this is probably more like what the future is going to look like than what we've been preparing for the last several decades. I mean, we built mount sites. I mean, just that's a great
Mm-hmm.
example, right? I mean, things that were not necessarily focused on at national training centers or joint readiness training centers or whatever else. Now we're more focused on, these very complicated scenarios where it isn't that cut and dry. You're not launching artillery and,
Yeah,
sending, heavy uh, tank battalions forward. I mean, those kind of things, right? So anyway, I think that's to me the lesson of Somalia. That is the value of Somalia. Not that losing that many great soldiers, you could ever put a price on it. But if there's some redeeming quality about that particular mission and what
mm-hmm.
we gained from it, to me, that's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it from the historical aspect because it was interesting to learn, as I've learned more and more about Mogadishu specifically, but the Middle East in general. Some of the learning stuff. Like when we went on mission, we had 4 tourniquets on us, and I found out that that went back to the Battle of Mogadishu because a lot of people had none, and so that was
Yep.
one of those important things. And then we're engineers, combat engineers at 12 Bravos. So door kicking is not our job, but I've learned it more than once and then taught it some too because of the off chance you're in a village and you need to take cover and you need to make sure that a structure is cleared that you can do that. So can I clear, structure to ranger level? No. But do I have some basis, some frame of reference? And that's all because of risk assessment and planning that definitely was drawn. So that's interesting to hear that from a historical aspect that I didn't even think about. Um, all right. Good deal. And then how about like so personally, and I guess this gets into a part I was curious about. So obviously you've dealt with some trauma and everyone deals with it differently. And so For you, and we can go however much of this as you want or not, but was it more right after you were released from captivity? Was it something you dealt with for a long time? What were some ways you found that you were able to overcome it? And then also, I know Mogadishu, of course, wasn't your only thing you were involved with engagement wise. So, what were some other things? For me, I went through a couple things on our deployment, and talking to people, the one that impacted me the most was not the more intense of the two big intense ones. And so that kind of took me by surprise. And now when I talk to other veterans, especially when it comes to PTSD and stuff and dealing with it, sometimes it's something the experience that isn't as bad as something else. And I thought, well, this one thing would be the catalyst of any issues I had, and turned out I was wrong.
Well, for me, I mean, Somalia is in a category of its own. I mean,
Mhm.
it just there were things there that happened that were so they're unimaginable. I mean, I can't even today even relate to it myself, even though I experienced it, because it's just so foreign to what my normal everyday life is today.
Yeah.
Right.
And in terms of recovering from it, I never used the PTSD to describe it, but I prefer to just say it is grief. I mean, I not afraid to say. I mean, I cried every day for a year. I mean, it just it hit you like a wave. Like, and I always said, if if experiencing something like that doesn't affect you, then I think there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
you know, I mean, I lost my crew, my friends. That's traumatic, and you go from thinking you're indestructible and flying these missions with all these amazing machines and people, and then all of a sudden, you're beaten down to this basic level of nothing, and your life's in the hands of the enemy, and you don't know if you're going to make it another day. And it took a while to get completely over it, and I don't think you're ever completely over it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's times when I'll just hear a song or whatever, and and again, I just think it's grief. I mean, it's just I'm I'm saddened by the fact that it, those things happen to those very good friends of mine, and they're never coming home. I used to say again during those briefings that the recovery for me anyway was four elements. It was physical because I was hurt pretty bad.
Mhm.
It was psychological, which is the tricky one. It was professional, and I don't know that this is necessarily the case across the board, but every wounded warrior I ever talked to seemed to have this desire to go back to their unit because if you've been in combat with a bunch of folks, I mean, it's a family, right? And you're all
Yeah.
relying on each other, and you trust each other, and the bonds are stronger than probably any you've ever had anywhere else in your life,
Yeah.
maybe outside of your marriage, right? And I think what you feel is that you getting removed from that, you're letting them down. Like it's they're left to kind of carry on without you, and you feel compelled to go back and want to continue to do it. I mean, that to me is the explanation, at least the way I think. And I wanted to get back in the cockpit. I mean, I wanted to stay in the unit. I mean, that was, from a professional perspective, that was number one. And then the fourth element is spiritual. Not everybody is a person of faith, but I grew up Catholic, and there's times when I've been a good Catholic and times when I've been a bad Catholic, and I used to say there's no atheists in foxholes. It's when things get really rough, most people tend to go ahead and hedge their bets and pray to God to help them through it. And so anyway, those are the four things. And for me, I mean, somehow they all move forward. All four of them. And I guess the unit gets credit for that. People around me get credit for that. I get a little bit of credit, and there's some luck. I mean, I could have easily lost my leg. I could have easily been, lost the ability to use my legs because my back was broken, and none of that happened. So
Mhm.
it's just a combination of circumstances that have got me to where I am today, and I'm very thankful for it.
Can you speak to any detail about the some of the recovery? So like spiritually, for instance, like was there being a man of faith, was that something that was helpful? What kind of roles family played? Maybe things because as we learn more about the psychological aspect of it, it's really interesting to me to hear some of the things people fixated on in a positive way that helped them get through, or certain ways they looked at things. And I've also seems like there's a trend with how people of faith seem to bounce back. I don't want to say like do a better job of it. That's not really a poor choice of words. Um, Maybe differently, or it's like because of the faith, they already have some grounding, like kind of like they got a head start, I guess is how I would word it. Again, maybe that's not the best way to word it. Hopefully people understand what I mean when I say that. So I'd just be interested in some of the physical aspect. I think we can probably understand that you do physical therapy. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But yeah, like some of the spiritual stuff, maybe even some of the professional, some of the ways you or the things you took advantage of in order to pull yourself back up.
Well, I think I would start with, from a family perspective, our first son's first birthday was the day after we deployed to Somalia. So, you know, one day I'm expecting to go pick up my parents at the airport to celebrate his first birthday, and the pager goes off, and boom, I'm gone. And
Wow.
so, thinking about him the whole time, you know, what's it going to be like for him if he, never knows me or doesn't have me around. So that was a motivator. I mean, I knew the unit was doing everything they could do, so that's a motivator. Uh, I don't know if you remember in the movie, but there's a scene where there's a Black Hawk flying around, and there's a voice from the sky saying,
Yeah.
"Mike, we won't leave without you." That's real. That actually happened, and I heard it. And
Wow.
the guy whose voice that is still a really good friend of mine, and we just vacationed together 2 weeks ago. So, all of that uh, contributes to keeping you moving in a positive direction. I always tell this story because I find it entertaining, and hopefully it serves to inspire uh, people to get beyond what they think they might be capable of. So the Army, from a professional perspective, the Army told me I couldn't fly ever again because my spine's deformed. I had a compression fracture, which compresses the vertebrae themselves, and they're not shaped correctly. So your back does this kind of S turn, and because of that, I'm grounded permanently. And I was devastated. I mean, after all this other stuff happens, and now, yeah, it's not the end of the world. I know that, but it was my professional identity, and so I decided that I would fight it, and I decided that to do so, I would run the Marine Corps Marathon and prove to the Army that, I would say probably the majority of pilots in the Army can't run a marathon. If I can run a marathon, you should probably let me fly. So uh, I remember what I didn't think about was that it served as a motivator because all these things are tied together, right? I mean, if you get up and you go run even a mile, because the first thing was just to be able to run a mile. Don't even worry about the time, just do a mile. It makes you feel good because you've accomplished something, and it's all about those small victories that lead to big accomplishments, and just progress, right? Maybe you're not going to bite it all off in one bite, but make progress, move in a positive direction, and adjust fire if you need to, if things don't work out. And then as the summer started coming along, because I'm going to run this, they pulled the femur rod out of my leg in January, and I'm going to run the Marine Corps Marathon in 10 months. And I don't think most people
Man.
thought I could do it, but I started running. I was fairly young. I think I was 32, 33, I guess, at this point. And you recover fairly quickly at that age. And I I started running and was getting further and further. And I finally realized, okay, I need to set some goals for the race. Just saying I'm running it is not good enough. So goal number one, I always said, was finish. Goal number two was beat Oprah Winfrey, because Oprah Winfrey ran that race in
Really?
1994.
No.
There's no freaking way Oprah's going to beat me in a marathon.
Dude, no, real quick, is just because I don't know, is the Marine Marathon an actual marathon, or what distance is it?
Yeah, it's 26.2. Yeah.
Oh my goodness
Wow.
gracious. Yeah, you got to beat Oprah in that.
In Washington, yeah, in Washington, D.C. It's an amazing race. I've done it twice. But and then I wanted to beat the commander, because the commander had run the race before. I'd run it before, so I wanted to beat my time, and then I wanted to qualify for Boston. But the real goal was to get back on flight status. In the end, I made 4 out of 5 goals. The only thing I didn't get was qualify for Boston. And I sent that finish time up to the Department of the Army, along with an endorsement of the chain of command, including the 3-star general who was commander at U.S. Army Special Operations Command, saying, put this guy back in the cockpit. And they signed the waiver and put me back in the cockpit. So,
Nice.
huge victory that sort of brought it all together, because obviously the physical came along. That made me feel better psychologically.
Yeah.
I got my professional part back. And then I began to realize that although I really questioned how something as horrible as Somalia could have happened, that there had to be a reason for it. And I didn't need to really worry about that, and just recognize that it serves a purpose that I'll never understand. And so that brought along that spiritual part as well. And again, I'm not an expert at this. All I can talk to is what worked for me, and
That's what I like. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think because everybody's different. So what I can't stand, and this is in the military and outside the military, it's both, is when people say X is how you do something. And like fortunately, I've had a lot of leaders in the military explain to me this is a way, not the way, which there are plenty of leaders that do the opposite. But I see very much the same thing in real life. And I think um there are people that like they can't talk to a psychologist. There's some people I've met that that's not how they deal with it because they can't be honest with that person. And then, interesting fact Nick brought up one time was the reason AA is so successful is because you've got people that will talk to other people because they've all had the same experience. And I think similar thing with vet stuff, veteran stuff. And so I like hearing about how different ways people tackle some of these issues because someone could be trying the old tried and true same thing that every psychologist tells them to do, but then they don't think about maybe I need to try something else because everybody is different. And so I appreciate you sharing kind of things that you worked on and did because I think that could definitely help somebody.
Right. There's not like a one size fits all
Right.
for dealing with something like that.
you know,
Everybody's got to kind of
and,
find their own path.
and some of the people that are counselors or psychiatrists aren't great at what they do. I mean, there's
Yeah.
there's some people you just don't make a connection with, because of just their personality or whatever, So,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, that makes it a bit of a crapshoot when you're dealing with something this. I'll use the word sensitive, but difficult, I guess, is a better word.
Yeah. Or challenging.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I also appreciate your take on referring to it as grieving as much as if not in place of PTSD. And not that we have to replace the phrase, but again, I like having other ways to think of things for people to try. So that's the first time I've heard of it referred to that way, and so I appreciate you mentioning that. I think it's also a good time to ask my favorite question. If you could go back in time, and I know we haven't quite gotten out of your military career yet in discussion, but if you could go back in time to the day you joined, what would be the advice you'd give yourself?
Uh, don't be afraid to fail. That's the advice that I give all people at that age. I think one thing that definitely holds people back is they're concerned that they're not going to succeed, and you're really shortchanging yourself if that is something that has too much influence over your decision making process. And I think that's probably something that Somalia just uh, magnified for me and allowed me to do things or encouraged me to do things, I guess is a better way to say it, that I might not have done otherwise, because I basically began to believe that really anything is possible. You just have to, and you're not going to succeed every time. I mean, that's why you can't be afraid to fail, because you are going to fail, but
Yeah.
it's not a
Right.
big deal. You know, you learn from it, you gain experience, and then you adjust fire and you do something else.
Yeah.
I think people forget that like you fail at everything when you start out of life. You fail at walking, you know, you fail
Yeah.
at riding the bike the first time. Like you got to just keep trying. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm in sales, and so like if I fail 75% of the time, it's actually really good because a good closing ratio is 25%. And
right.
so, even if you're doing 20 or 10 or whatever, but I also explained to a lot of people like you have to fail to succeed. So if the more you're failing, the more you're succeeding because you're learning how not to do things. There's all that old thing about Thomas Edison found 100 ways to not make a light bulb or whatever it was. But
Right.
also, what I tell people is like, if I told you tried this 10 times and that you would fail 9 times before succeeding, would you have no problem trying 10 times at everything? Because on that 10th time, you're going to make it every time, right? And of course, they're like, yeah, I would do everything. So I'm like, so now it's the same scenario, but you don't know how many times you're going to fail to succeed. So you could fail twice or you could fail 100 times, but you will succeed if you keep doing it.
Right.
So I've had a few people, especially getting into sales, tell me that that advice was helpful. Um, but yeah, absolutely. That's another good one. So
Yeah.
another good advice to young people starting out for sure. Um, so how about okay, so you got back to flying. Did you stay in the 160th?
I did. I
Okay.
stayed there
Oh,
for
wow.
5 more years.
Okay. And then because I think you got out in 2001, right?
Correct.
Okay, so did you go somewhere else briefly, or is my math just slightly off by a year or two?
Oh,
And
yeah, your ears are smoking there, so I can tell you're trying to add. So because I was recovering, I was
all
still
right.
in the unit, but I was basically on medical leave.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
All right.
And so what I did actually is that I went and got my degree during that time instead of just sitting around, watching game shows or whatever. And so when I got back to the unit after my medical leave was over, I had my bachelor's degree and just got back on flight status and then stayed 5 more years.
Good for you. Yeah, I think I could be motivated sometimes, but I probably would have been lazy. So hats off to you for using that
Yeah,
time
that
wisely. These
man.
days, I would have catched up on a lot of Netflix. I can tell you that.
Right. You couldn't really binge back then.
It's probably good. I probably would have gotten my degree then out of boredom. So, um, well, that's awesome. So, what I'm very interested to hear too is about when you transitioned out. It now looking at your LinkedIn profile, it looked pretty seamless going from leaving the military to going in the private sector. So, I'm kind of curious to know. I know, especially at the higher tier of the organization of the Army, sometimes people come looking for you more than, but I guess what I'm asking is, how did you manage your transition? Did you give it a lot of thought? Did things just kind of fell in place? Did you kind of get out and you got lucky and you transitioned right into things? How did that process work out for you?
Um, I was fortunate in that my last few years in the unit, I got involved in the acquisition side of the military because that's very complicated. When you're a operational guy, you don't, at least I didn't care how we bought the helicopters. I didn't care where the logistics came from. All I cared
Oh,
about
right.
is it needs to be there when I need it, and it was. And, and, but there's this gigantic infrastructure that exists both, on the commercial side where all the products and logistics are produced, and then on the government side where it's all planned for and budgeted for and acquired. And I got at least a little bit of exposure to that, which helps tremendously because if you go straight from operational, you'd have to be a lot smarter than me to go from operational straight into some sort of acquisition role where you were really contributing outside of being maybe a subject matter expert. A lot of people end up either consulting or being subject matter experts, and you're leveraging that expertise you have about whatever it is you did in the military. But to understand, the big picture and how it's all done requires that little bit of exposure. And I sort of stumbled into it. I really didn't want to do it, but because of my back, I couldn't fly the operational missions. I had to serve in a staff capacity while still flying. And so again, sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. And
Yeah.
I ended up, learning a little bit about all that. So the next thing is figuring out where should I go? Because initially I was going to stay at Fort Campbell, and nothing against the Clarksville community or Hopkinsville, great places, but the opportunities for someone with my experience in those communities, there's not really a good way to leverage that, right? I mean, I again, I'm not trying to put anything down, but I actually went and talked to a car dealer about selling, just what are my options, right? And none of it felt right at all for me. And then I found out about this place, Huntsville, Alabama, where all of the aviation and missile acquisition for the Army is done.
Wow.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, and there was a couple of guys from the unit that had already come down here. And again, it's that sort of listening to the people that have been there, done that before you, and at least, listening to them. You don't always have to, base your decision on their input, but talked about, what a great place this was and what the opportunities were, perfect for somebody with my experience. You plug right in, become a program manager ultimately, or, whatever, either working for industry or working for the government. And so that was what I decided to do. And I came down here, and it was pretty seamless. I mean, I went straight from being in the unit to working on a new helicopter for the Army, which is actually 3 generations ago from the aircraft that just got canceled. I don't know how closely you guys monitor what goes on in Army aviation, but we just had another new aircraft canceled. And this was the 2 times ago predecessor of that aircraft, called the Comanche.
Mm.
And that's, again, sounded pretty cool to come work on this brand new helicopter. And
Is,
it was okay, but then I found other opportunities once I got here, and
mhm.
then ultimately started my own business based on all that experience.
I am interested to hear about that in just a moment. You did say Comanche just now, so I'm curious because I wouldn't. So when I grew up mostly in the 90s, and my dad had a computer game called the Comanche, and he flew helicopter, TAC helicopter, and he told me that it was supposed to replace the Apache, I think is what he said. Maybe our facts are slightly off, but it was and then didn't. And so that's just funny that I didn't know that's how true that statement was or some of the details. That's interesting. Is
Yeah, it
that
was really going to partner with the Apache. It was going to replace
Oh,
the OH-58, which at the time was the Armed Reconnaissance helicopter. Uh, it was a great platform, but Comanche was bringing a whole bunch of new technology.
Mhm.
The issue was, which is often the case, it starts with what's called the mission needs statement, and the mission needs statement for Comanche was written in 1981. So
Mm.
when I retire 20 years later, they're still trying to design this thing. They got 2 prototypes based on requirements that are 20 years old.
Yeah.
And and what it creates is this sort of spiral effect, and that's why these programs all get off track, because the requirements are evolving, but the contractors who are building these things bid on a specific set of requirements that now is outdated.
Yeah.
So, and then, you got to take an appetite suppressant if you're the government, because you can't do everything that you would ever imagine it doing,
Right.
because it's unaffordable. It's the first time I ever heard the word unobtainium.
Yeah.
It's the material that all these high speed weapon systems are made of. And you just can't get there. And they, run into budget problems, and they cancel the program. And that's now happened 3 times. And you'll never see that aircraft come back, because now that mission is kind of covered by
Right.
unmanned platforms. It can't do everything that a armed reconnaissance helicopter could do, but that's between those and the Apaches, they're going to cover that mission. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's why I came down.
Okay. Interesting. So then yes, on to you starting your own business, which I looked up, read about it, but since you're here, I think you're going to do a way better job describing it than I will. So we'll go ahead and I'll stop talking about it and you can tell us all about it.
Well, I ended up getting dissatisfied with the company that acquired, this whole thing within the business world. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions that go on. And a lot of times a small business will get sucked up by a large business. And culture wise, it's night and day, usually, because you're going from, I don't want to say family owned and operated, but it's, a very small, close knit group of people that work together well and wear a lot of hats and enjoy what they're doing. And now you're part of this big corporate entity that is all process oriented, and it's the right answer for certain things, but if you flourish in a small business, odds are you're not going to flourish in a large business. And I didn't
I
like it.
I
Yeah,
experienced that.
yeah. So I had a couple. You got three things you could do: stop working, go find another small, or do it yourself, or just suck it up and be miserable. And I felt like it was the right time, based on the experience I had, that I could probably take a shot at doing this myself. And it's a huge risk. I don't want to mislead people into thinking, you just walk up to a government contracting officer and they're going to write you a check. It is a hard thing to do. But if you understand the process and you are willing to take some risk and you make good decisions, you get good people around you, and you find where you can fill a blank, it can be done. And we just started out with nothing out of my house, and then 15 years later we had 700 people and locations all over the world. And
Wow.
Do you think that your your sector you were covering, your niche, was helpful in your success and that you, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I would figure you wouldn't have as much competition doing what you were doing versus if you did something else trying to contract for the government. And maybe I'm wrong.
well, no, I think you're right. There's certain things that, I mean, everybody can chase. You know what I mean? It's,
Yeah,
again, ticket, whatever it is. I mean,
everyone
something
wants to
that,
be a firearms instructor.
yeah, or again, I hate to single anything out to kind of diminish the value of any of these roles, but there are absolutely opportunities where the competition is off the chart, and that's a part of what you have to be able to navigate. If you're going to put a bid in and there's 50 other bids going in, the odds of you winning are pretty low. I mean, you
Yeah,
don't have to be a genius to realize that. So, so what you've got to do is find where can I differentiate myself? There's because everything is not everything, but most things are competitive. I mean, you have to win it. No one's going to just give it to you. And
right.
you have to win it on price, or you got to win it on technical, or you got to win it on schedule, or you got to win it on what's called past performance, meaning your report card on how you did on other stuff. And it's a block and tackle. You win a little piece of work, you do good work, you maybe make enough to survive, bid on something a little bit bigger, and then you sort of make your way up. And we got to the point where we were bidding on gigantic contracts.
Yeah.
Would would you say there's any like soft skills that you learned that kind of helped you in that path to succeed?
For sure. I mean, there's all sorts of books out there on business, but there's this guy, Peter Drucker, I think is who this quote comes from. And he says, culture eats strategy for breakfast, meaning,
Mm,
and that's what we tried to do from day one. And again, I brought that from the unit because to me, the difference in the unit is the culture. And so my thinking was we can make a difference here in industry if we could somehow differentiate ourselves by creating a culture where people are more committed to the mission. They're looking for ways to save costs. They're not, all these things that make you more competitive if everybody's bought in.
yeah.
Now, it wasn't 100% success, but I do think it was fairly successful, and I think most people got it, and I think it helped us. And then, the things that you learn from being in the military, if you were in positions of authority or leadership positions, I mean, we all seen good leaders and bad leaders, and if you can replicate those things that the great leaders did, and sometimes it's just beyond your ability as a person. Some of these folks that are great leaders, just there's something about them that you'll never be able to replicate.
Yeah.
But you can understand, how taking care of your people matters, right? I mean, we all learn that. Last thing you want to do is work for somebody that cares nothing about anything
Oh,
other
yeah.
than themselves,
Right.
and it makes the whole organization better when there are people that have that we mentality. I mean,
Mhm.
we always just tried to, it's as simple as that. You don't use the word I, you always use the word we, right? Because it's a team effort. And again, it helps everybody commit to making the organization a success.
That's great
Awesome.
advice. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so, and then it looks like you contract now. Um, so I guess I'm curious about your transition from owning the company. Do you still own some of it? Did you sell it just to kind of move on?
Yeah, so it's very complicated.
Fair enough.
Uh, I did what's called an ESOP transaction where the
Oh,
employees actually end up owning the company.
Oh,
that's cool.
But what's and then why it's complicated is it doesn't cost them anything. They don't buy it. It's essentially given to them over time, and it involves tax breaks, and it involves bank financing, and the magic of it is the longer you stay with the company, the more your ownership stake grows, along with the value of the stock you already have and the new stock you get every year. And it was a great way to basically share the success of the organization without giving up a whole lot. I mean, it's hard to say. You'll never know if, selling outright financially would have been better for me than doing the ESOP. But the ESOP seemed, there was so much good about doing it. I mean, in the end, we created more than 10 millionaires in the transaction.
nice.
Some people that were just, to put it in military perspective, E6 working, for the contract that they've been on for
Mhm.
12 years, and they've been with the company that long. They had their stock in there, and the stock appreciated, and then they were actually able to buy in a little bit. So they wanted to take some risk of their own and convert their 401ks, and some people did, and those people really benefited because the stock value went through the roof once the final transaction occurred. And then the company then actually sold again, and that's why all these people got all these financial benefit.
Okay.
And I'm completely out. I was on the board for a while, but now I'm off the board, and I'm completely out of it. And I've tried to totally separate myself, and I mean, I miss the people, but I don't miss the stress. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Once you got to 700 people, wow, man, you got it made, right? No, it's 700 freaking problems every day. I mean,
Yeah. Oh,
it's like,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
and you got to keep feeding the beast, right? Because now you can't go in that little piece of work. You got to go in a big piece of work to keep everybody, you know, employed for the long term. So I don't miss the stress. I mean,
I'm sure not.
I told people I equate it to being in command for 15 years.
Sounds
That's
awful.
really what it's like. I mean, but you're, and at least being in command in the military, you don't have to worry about where the money's coming from. The
Yeah,
people, hey,
true.
being a CEO of a company, you got to worry about that too. I mean,
Hmm.
I guess on the softer side, you're not going to combat, and but it is very stressful, and it's tough, but it can be very rewarding when it all works out.
That's a good deal. And I didn't know about that. Well, I didn't say offloading the company, but basically giving the company to employees. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
What's
I think I wish that it was more well known, because I think a lot of the labor issues we have would be resolved if you
Oh
could
yeah.
somehow implement a strategy like this. Because if you're an employee and you're part of an ESOP company, if you save the company money or you deliver a product early or you improve customer service or anything that
Mhm.
helps the organization helps you as well because the stock price goes up
Mhm.
and your stake in the company goes up.
Now,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I work at a employee-owned company and I agree. Like the whole culture is just different because every action we take is kind of like everybody is thinking about is
Yeah.
this for the greater good of everybody rather than just like my own, I don't want to work today, I want to be lazy kind of thing. And
Do you
yeah.
have do you have to start the business that way, or is that something you can transition to later?
Yeah, you can transition. Yep. We were not an ESOP until 2017.
Okay,
So 9 years as a completely privately held and then partial ESOP, then 100% ESOP, and then sold.
great.
That's cool.
So you're contracting on the side then. It's just kind of something you do for your free time to either earn money or just to use skills you've got that you want to put to use.
Yeah, I'm not doing a ton of stuff. I'm on a few boards, mostly nonprofits.
Yeah.
Uh, there's only one for profit. Uh, it's Archer Aviation. It's one of these electric vertical takeoff and landing
Hmm.
competitors, which is probably the future of urban air mobility, I would say. Uh, you ought to look them up. It's just it's pretty cool technology.
I might have seen it. Is it kind of like a pod you sit in? It's got four rotors.
It actually has 10
Oh,
uh, all electric, and Archer's is piloted.
Okay.
And there are some companies out there that are looking at autonomous. But my thought process is if you're wanting to ride at the airport, are you more likely to get into a machine that has a pilot or a machine that doesn't have a pilot?
Definitely a
I think,
pilot.
yeah. Yeah.
at least
Hands
for
down.
now. Yeah. Yeah. At least for now.
Um, okay. Awesome. So parallel to you growing or having a army career and then moving into a looks like a pretty outstanding civilian career. We like to ask kind of like parenting, how you manage your family. That's another one of those things where there's all kinds of advice out there, but exploring what different people do and works for different people is always good. Caveat to this question. I understand that is it correct your wife was a Huey pilot?
Yep.
So I'm a little concerned or curious as to how you met and then how kind of family life looked through this movement through life, if you will.
Yeah. So we met post Somalia. Her son, her previous husband actually was killed in a helicopter crash. And so she was a single mom at the time. And her son ended up on a soccer team, and I was coaching youth soccer at the time. And I always tease her that, she rigged the roster or something, trying to.
Matt Eversman said something like that. He said something like his wife stalked him, like or something like that.
It's
When we
a
talked to
joke.
him.
It's absolutely a joke. But yeah, so we got to know each other there. We had met once before, but it was just a brief encounter. And uh, we have a lot in common, obviously. And we, I don't know, I don't think there could be a better match, honestly, because we've been married now over 20 years. Let's see, 2001. So 23 years we've been married
Mhm.
Wow.
and, raised a blended family of six. The number six
Goodness.
is our child together, but the other five are blended. And it's not easy, I mean, I guess what made it a little bit easier is that period of time where I was deployed all the time and going to combat, I wasn't a parent yet. So that's why I say that to me would make it even harder because you're missing ball games and plays and everything that parents do with their kids, birthdays that are very important to be a part of. So I'm fortunate that the way the timing all worked out for me, I was beyond that time in my life and got to do all that stuff. Like coaching soccer. I mean, my theory was, look, I'm doing a game anyway. I might as well be in charge, right?
That's
Because you don't,
good.
although they do train you, it doesn't take a lot of in-depth knowledge to coach, 6-year-olds on how to play soccer.
It's
And it's
true.
fun.
And they're not gonna listen to half of what you say anyway, so I guess you
Yeah.
just say less things.
Hey, it's all about the snacks.
Yeah,
Okay.
my
More
daughter's
spice.
6 right now, so I'm totally on your wavelength there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, but they're all different, even though, blended or not, even the biological children are, it's just amazing how different they are. And
Yeah.
it makes you kind of question, I mean, how much influence do you actually have as a parent? It's just like, how did you turn out so different? But
Hmm.
they all have, their strengths and their weaknesses that are unique to them. And all you can do is support them,
Yeah.
and do what you can, when they get older. Sometimes this is one issue that I know I've seen with some friends of mine. They start to become politically divided, because young people tend to think one way and older people tend to think another way, not to be generalize too much, but I think
Yeah.
statistically you would find that. And I know it creates rifts in some relationships, and it sort of happened to me. And what I said was, look, the relationship I have with this child is more important than political views, and we just won't talk about it. I mean, you
Yeah.
think what you want to think, and I'll think what I want to think, and we disagree, but we can't let that come between us. And
Man.
unfortunately, in a lot of families, it does come between people, and that's really sad because especially now because we're such a divided nation that there doesn't seem to be any middle ground between one side and the other. And
Hmm. Yeah. I That's good because my daughter, she has my intensity that I have sometimes, and so when of course 6-year-old doesn't know how to manage that intensity, whereas some people, many people that know me personally, are like, "Well, you're intense," and I'm like, if you see the right moment, you'll know what I'm talking about. But and so I'm trying to help her through managing her emotions and that intensity. But in doing that now, when she's 6, which is plenty of a challenge, I do think about when she's a teenager or older, and how to, I put a lot of emphasis on trying to manage the relationship now because I know it's not going to get easier. Whether it gets harder or not, I know it won't get easier. And it'll also, easier or harder, be different. And so try that's the idea of remembering that. There's people have said things like that I try to think about when I'm in some of the more, she's screaming at me or something because I turned on the light and she wanted to do it. Those kinds of arguments that are great. But yeah, I definitely have things I cling to, but to have some ammunition for the future of right, what's most important, and a lot of it too is like you're probably not going to change a 17-year-old's mind about politics. Why
right,
even
right,
get into it?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the effects of social media now, and what they hear from their peers, in whatever circle they end up in, which you might not even really be aware of once they're old enough to have their own social
Yeah.
circle.
Right.
I mean, you have no way of knowing. I mean, they're on their phone, and who knows what they're reading or who they're corresponding.
Yeah. Absolutely. So was your wife in the army and that's why she was a Huey pilot? Okay.
Yeah, she outranks me. She went to airborne school. I didn't, so she's one up at me across the board.
Oh, I always like being bested though by, I don't want to be the top one because then you don't learn anything. Kind of like you were saying, you want advice from somebody else, right?
Yep.
Maybe not 100% time your wife, but at least 50% of the time. With you talking about, you've said it a few times in the interview about listening to other people and taking their advice. Something else I've heard you say some is kind of referring to always something to learn mentally. And you did mention earlier with Somalia, and again, I've heard you reference it other times. I'm kind of curious. Um, I agree with that. I kind of developed that mentality in high school. I had a teacher that ran guitar club that basically referenced not being the smartest guy in the room. But I'm kind of curious, was that something you picked up when you were in the army, or was that something you picked up earlier on in your life that then you were able to apply as you went through?
I don't know. I guess, and I think it kind of ebbed and flowed. I got at one point I got probably overconfident as a pilot, and I got humbled a little bit. I actually damaged an aircraft. Not a big deal, but I damaged an aircraft, and it really kind of opened my eyes to, you're not as good as you think you are, and I would say if there was a turning point, that's probably it. And from that point on, realized that you can always get better, you can always learn more, and you're never going to be the anything.
Mhm.
I mean, in terms of no one is as good at you at X, right? So there's somebody to learn from, and even the people that are inferior in the experience levels or whatever, oftentimes are people you can learn from.
Yeah,
That problem I talked about with the guns. One of the crew chiefs figured it out, and he figured it out because he was just committed to solving the problem and came up with a brilliant idea, cracked the code, and fixed it.
nice. What was the issue?
So there was a component that was overheating, and what was really frustrating was after we shut the aircraft down the first time, the next day went back out, powered it up, went out and shot it, shot fine,
Ooh.
and then went out on the mission and it didn't shoot again because those
Mm.
missions were 4 hours long. So the component is heating up over time. And
Oh,
and guy's a genius. I mean, he thought so. The next day, after the second time it happened, he powered up the bird in the hangar on what we call an AGPU. It's ground power, basically that powers up all the systems. And he waited like an hour, and then he tried it, and it didn't work.
interesting.
So he solved the problem.
So was it cutting itself off because it was overheating,
Yeah,
or
it was over.
okay?
It was some electrical component that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's like basically I always find ironic that like a safety thing was good because I mean who knows could start a fire, but like the safety thing also made things unsafe by
Right.
by not disallowing what it's supposed to do. So was the fix just a different heat sink, or did you just not turn it on until you needed it?
Well, actually, that was one thing that we did. We left it turned off as an extra precaution. But they actually went to a local like Radio Shack or something and got some new electronic components and replaced it.
Nice. Interesting. Good deal. So, obviously doing my homework. One thing I saw about was your run in the primary for in Alabama for it was Senate, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Um, so I'm curious what things you learned about because I mean there's a fair amount of veterans that successfully or not try to make the transition. Some do successfully, but what I've noticed is, I've got this belief that getting into politics you almost can't get in unless you allow yourself to be poisoned, and then it's just a downhill spiral, which again this is complete emotional conjecture, so I'm not saying any of this is based in fact, but I'm kind of curious if you can speak to that and what attempting that transition was like. Maybe some turnoffs that you didn't anticipate, maybe things you liked that you didn't anticipate as well.
Yeah. I made a joke recently that I'd rather talk about captivity, but it,
That's
it,
that's okay.
it wasn't, it wasn't,
We
it's not quite that bad. Um,
And if you like, we
I
can cut
think,
it out. Remember, we can edit. So if you,
yeah,
if you'd rather just leave it out, but if you want to speak to it, then we're all ears.
I think most of what you said is correct. I think some people can maintain their identity and still succeed. Uh, I ended up in a situation where it was just really bad timing for me, not realizing how committed some very powerful people were to see the race turn out the way it turned
Yeah.
Oh,
out. When they're dropping $10 million in a super PAC to run negative ads that are, I mean, they're lies.
Yeah.
You know, and you can't combat $10 million worth of negative advertising. I mean,
No.
I was
Crazy.
ahead by double digits with about 6 weeks to go to the primary, and then they launched this blitzkrieg once I got in front, and I ended up coming in third.
Damn.
And
What?
it's kind of sad that that's how it works, but and it isn't that way in every race, I don't think, because one thing is, and I realize is the Senate's a big swing at the ball. I mean, that for someone who's never been in politics at all to go for that is a big swing at the ball. And part of it is that I decided that was going to be okay. Is I don't think I want to be in the House. I mean, it's just more knuckleheads you got to deal with, and you really don't have as much of an ability to influence anything, and you still got to deal with all the crap. So I thought if I'm going to do it, this is the level I want to come in at. I'm not sure I would have been, when I say good for the job, I mean, it requires being a politician. And I
Yeah.
think we can all define that however we want in our minds. But
I think I have a sneaking suspicion you and I define it very similarly.
because people had talked to me about this before, and my answer before was, I don't like the politics of business. I can assure you I would not like the politics of politics.
Yeah.
That's what I said. And then I realized, sort of like starting the company, this is a point in time where I have an opportunity. I can't be afraid to fail. I got to give it a shot. And I just didn't realize that there was a couple of other people with a lot of influence that wanted a different outcome, and they got with it.
Yeah.
Was there anything in particular that got you heading that way? Or like, I'm just curious kind of what got you into going for it.
Well, I mean, people had talked to me over the years, and in this one case, it was, incumbent senators retiring, at least based on the field at the time, it didn't look like a highly competitive field. And again, what I didn't know is who's in the background, who's the puppet master in the background.
Yeah. To a degree. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The issue though, is it's running for Senate is tough because you got to canvass the whole state, and that's the other difference between the two. If you're in the House, you've got your district, and it's a lot geographically manageable.
Yeah.
I mean, if you study Alabama politics, it's really three different states, because you've got the high tech north, which has got Huntsville, you got the old school central, which is Birmingham, and then you got Mobile, that feels like they're the kind of the bastard stepchildren in the south. And it's really three different dynamics, and just getting from one end of the state to the other takes 6 hours, so
Yeah.
it's tough to cover all that and meet enough people. So you have to spend a lot of money on advertising, which we did, and we did well, did it effectively. That's what drove us to be in the lead. But then once the reaction came, and it is the super PACs. I think the super PACs are a problem because, there is no contribution limit for a super PAC. You can contribute anything you want, and they can't communicate with the candidate, but they know how to influence the race.
Right. I think
funding's unlimited.
Yeah. Being like the money being in politics is kind of scary to me. And as funny as Robin Williams' joke, I don't know if you've heard it, is, it's also very truthful. He basically said, I think it was in his Broadway stand-up, that politicians should wear jackets like NASCAR drivers, so you know who's sponsoring them.
Yeah.
And that's where it's scary to me, because this idea that, like you said, it's not everywhere, but there's places where you can basically buy an election, which to me, you look at some competitions and everyone's kept to the same, other than what they have in their brain or what their body can achieve, like the Olympics. And so it's like, Everyone starts at the same spot. Everyone, so just it, it it's interesting hearing a firsthand account because a friend of mine was in local politics here, and it was similar, but not, it's not as magnified at the local level, I think.
Hmm.
So the one other thing, because it is a veterans program here, that I realize is that people don't understand the military at all.
Yeah.
If you look at the statistics, and I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but post World War II, you had like 12 million people with direct military experience because so many people were brought into the military. Pretty much every family had somebody immediate that had been in the military. Now it's like 1/25th as much
Interesting.
exposure to someone who served in the military. People just don't understand it. And for me, understanding this whole special ops thing that I was in is just intuitive, but they're even less able to comprehend all that. So when I talk about I did this and I did that and I did, they're like, it's almost, I don't want to say it's meaningless, but it's kind of lost on them. And I was really surprised at that. I thought, because I had the business experience and I had the military experience, those two things, both of which were successful, would have really been unbeatable, but just didn't get people connecting on the military side.
Yeah. Which is funny because I think in the end that is the type of candidate somebody wants. But again, for the reasons you said already, I think it really muddies the water. Which is interesting to me because in the election of 2016, I got more interested in American history, especially politically, because I was curious. I'm like, because people say all the time, because people forget history, they're like, well, this is the craziest thing ever, or this is that. And so I started looking into like old elections. Like I think it was the election of 1828, something like that. It was like one of the first elections where they started lying. And so I'm like, man, they've been lying since the 1800s.
Yep, they were posting negative campaigning on trees in little pieces of paper. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it
That's just
goes all the way
wild.
back to then. Yeah.
Just wild. Are you still able to fly at all now? Recreationally, of course.
I could, but I don't.
Yeah.
It just, my other saying is flying is kind of like golf. If you don't do it a lot, you're probably not very good at it.
Hmm.
And the price you pay for not being very good at being a pilot is more than putting a ball in the hazard. So,
That's fair. That's fair.
So are you a golfer then?
no.
Okay. Me either. That's fine. I'm just curious. Um,
I played a little bit, but I don't play much, so I'm not very good.
yeah.
That's a good one.
Oh, do you have any other hobbies you have moved on to, just out of curiosity before we wrap up?
Yeah, I stay very active. I mean, I work out pretty much every day, either lifting weights, running, riding a bike. I climbed a bunch of mountains in Colorado in the last few years. There's a bunch of 14ers, they call them out there. I've climbed 17 of those.
Nice.
Snow ski, I was on the mountain 20 days this year, which for real fanatics is not a lot, but for somebody who lives in Alabama, 20 days skiing is pretty good. I was playing hockey until 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe now.
Wow.
Here locally in the men's league, we call it the beer league. And you know why they call it that, right?
Yeah.
Guys get together, sweating, so you can go have a beer afterwards.
Good deal.
Just a little bit of fishing, a little bit of hunting, a lot
Yeah,
of water sports. So, I mean, I definitely stay busy. Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah, it's my wife and I keep really busy now, even with the kids, and we try to involve them as much as we can. And then we just look at, when they are grown, we still want to be able to be moving around and doing all that stuff, staying just as busy. So it's good to see that's achievable. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
You got to keep the body moving. I mean, if you become sedentary, and I'm absolutely convinced you're going to lose it. You've got to keep all the fluids going. It's like a machine, I mean, you leave your car sitting there for 2 years, don't do anything with it, it's probably not going to start.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Um, what other questions do you have, Nick?
That's all I got. Yeah.
All right. By the way, I did want to say, uh, whoever did your campaign ads, those ads are awesome. Yeah,
Well,
watch.
unfortunately, that's what drew all the fire.
Yeah,
Oh no.
yeah, they were a little too good. If you ever do
Yeah.
that again, Mike, you want to like maybe relax it on the Blackhawk flying around and everything.
I gotta
Well,
watch
that's what I
that.
told him. Because typical military, right? I did an after action review when
Yeah,
it was over, and that was one of the points I made. I said we came out too strong too early. We should have waited till close to the end,
yeah.
and then just done a blitzkrieg, not giving them time to react. And they, that's contrary to the way most campaigns are run. But it would be interesting to know if that would have sort of changed the outcome. I think it probably would have.
I mean, I think I agree with you because you were saying you came out strong, and then that's when I think you were, they say tallest blade of grass gets cut first. So they saw
Right.
you rising above, and they're like,
Mm,
that's the target. So
Yeah.
wow.
you were, it's cool. Yeah, you'll have to.
Yeah,
They're on
I need
YouTube.
to watch
They're good
those.
ads. I was watching them today. I guess also out of curiosity, I'm a very curious person. So I was watching you fly around. Obviously, this gray Blackhawk. Did somebody just have? Because I know they can be privately owned. Did somebody just own one and you just flew it for the commercial?
Yeah, we rented it. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool, neat deal. Well, all right. That's all I've got, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor having you on the show.
Yeah,
Appreciate your openness to talk about everything, and um, yeah, we wish you well. And I think we've heard a lot of great things that can help a lot of people that listen in. So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. I hope that's the case. There's always something that you never know how it's going to impact somebody if they hear it. Hopefully, it'll move things in a positive direction somewhere out there.
Yes, sir.
definitely. It was really nice
All
to
right.
meet you, Mike.
Yep.
Good meeting you.
We thank you for listening, and we hope you got something helpful out of this.
Right now, the best way to support us is to simply spread the word. If you know a fellow veteran who could use some resources to elevate their life, send them our way.
Until next time, remember to check your zeros, fives, tens, and 25s.